You are watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Sunday afternoon, 3 p.m. Central Standard, October 29th, 2023. Today we're doing something very special. We're playing a homemade, one-of-a-kind game. Let's back up a little bit and do some bookkeeping, and then we'll get started here. This is our normal time, normal day of the week when we play a play-by-mail game. We've played a bunch of them on this channel. We've played Murders by Mail 3 cases, which took us months to play. Then we've run out. And then we stumbled on a system called Dear Holmes, which we've been playing for the last few months. You get a letter every week, 3 or 4 of them, laying out a case. Sherlock Holmes is passed off a case to us, his second string. We get a couple letters elaborating on it, and then we try to formulate theories, but we have no actual interaction with the system. It's not really a game. We just try to figure out what's going on. At the end of the month, you get the solution. We've had some mixed results with it, but it is fun. And last week, I suggested the idea that someone could write a case, write the first letter of a case, and then watch our theories, and then adapt the case to our theories, and maybe even let us make suggestions of what to do. So a more interactive play-by-mail game. That's what we're doing this week, thanks to one of our viewers. Okay, so backing up a little bit, we're just finishing up our October playthrough. We've done about 60 hours of live streaming of spooky, scary games, and that's coming to a close with the finale on Halloween night itself, where we'll play Witchery Spell, which is sort of a deluxe escape room box. And then in November, I'll probably spend a little less time live streaming and a little more time catching up on some reviews. So you'll see some board game reviews and a lot of mystery reviews from me. And you'll see another game development session live stream from me. I'm not sure what that will focus on, but it'll revolve around High and Low, the detective game that I've been working very hard on. And I could still use some volunteers for that. If you want to help figure out what games we play on the channel, or maybe help with High and Low, you can stop in the Discord. You'll find a link on the About page, or the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. Okay, so let me see if I can give you a little outline here of what I intend to do today. Okay, we don't really have a name for this. I'm calling it sort of open-ended improv Sherlock Holmes Mystery by Mail, but we can figure that out as we go. I used to have slides for this. Where's my, I guess we can do it this way. Okay, so here's the idea here. I've laid out already based on Dear Holmes. The person who's writing this case for us is Matt C., who listened to my plea last week and said, I'll just give it a try. And I think it's important for me to tell the audience here, tell you guys at home, what I told Matt, which is, don't worry about making this good. Let's just try to make it. That's hard enough. Let's just treat it as an experiment and see how it goes. I am fascinated, excited, maybe as excited for this as anything that we've done on the channel. And I don't have any expectations that it's going to be a compelling mystery, that it's going to challenge us. Nothing. I have no expectations other than to experiment with this new idea that we're getting letters and the situation may change depending on what we say, and it's going to be improvised for us as we go. And I should give credit to some other people, other viewers of the Co-op for Two channel that are helping with Matt. And I was telling Rob, so Rob has done work on the envelope stuff and in laying out the letters and getting the fonts looking good. And it's pretty impressive. And Debbie has been doing her magic, helping with editing. And I was telling Rob, you have to, there's few things as enjoyable as saying, hey, I want to work on a project, and having other people say, that sounds fun, let me help. Let me participate with you. And so I think, you know, it's wonderful to see that Matt has stepped up and volunteered to do this, and other people are helping. They connected through the Discord, by the way. I don't want to push the Discord on you, but if you want to join the Discord, there are a bunch of people with some interesting experience there that are always up for talking. Okay, so here's my proposal for how we structure today's stream. I propose we start out by reading this. And then I want to spend some time brainstorming with the channel the ground rules for this. How do we approach this? Not as players. Well, also, how do we approach this as players? But how should this system work? How should the author, Matt, who's in the channel, how should he approach this? How should he react to our replies? What form should they take? What are we allowed to do? This is all new territory for us, so I want to talk about that. But I thought we'd jump in and just start reading the letters. And then I think what we'll do is we'll try to formulate a written reply to this letter. But we can talk about that. All right, so let's just start reading the letter, and then I've got a couple more slides about philosophy and brainstorming of this. But let's just get started and read this, open this letter and see what we've got. Okay, now I wouldn't mind not cutting this for reasons that are not important. Okay. So we've got actually 3 letters. Now, I haven't read these. I mean, I had to print them and fold them, but I haven't read them. So we've got a single-sided, a double-sided, and a double-sided. So we have quite a bit to read here. All right, let's see what we've got here. It starts with a letter from John Watson. All right, let's see what we've got here. John H. Watson, MD, 221B Baker Street. Some of this may be from Dear Holmes. The signatures, maybe the letterhead, I'm not sure. Rob can fill us in. I see it's customized to me. Dear Mr. Reichler, I write to you once again in need of your assistance. Our mutual friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, has become quite preoccupied by a missing persons case and would like to defer to your time and judgment on this enclosed matter. In the course of our detective consulting, we often receive concerned letters from spouses who suspect their partners may be involved in an affair, whether they realize it or not. How do you realize it, or how do you not realize you're having an affair? These cases are quickly solved and dismissed by Holmes with minimal effort, but he hesitated to do so here. I've attached a letter we received from Mrs. Isabel Harrington regarding changes to her husband's behavior. Her husband, Peter Harrington, is a cab driver with the Abernathy Carriage Company. Mrs. Harrington has come to us to determine the nature of her husband's secret, and to either assure her there is no concern or reveal details she must promptly be made aware of. Mrs. Harrington also included a letter from her husband's friend and fellow driver, Edmund Whitcomb. She approached Whitcomb out of concern for her husband, and he offered to provide whatever assistance he could in matters pertaining to his employer and mutual colleagues of Harrington. I've been told that Mr. Whitcomb is at your disposal in this matter. Also at your disposal is Mr. Bill Wiggins of the Baker Street Irregulars. I see, Wiggins is going to help us there. As always, Wiggins is willing and able to assist in our investigations by following leads and errands at our direction. He is a sharp young man. Once you have reviewed the attached materials, please inform us of how Mr. Wiggins or Mr. Whitcomb may best assist you. If you require the assistance of an expert in any other matter, do not hesitate to request such an individual. Wonderful. I've become quite adept at locating experts who may provide testimony or assistance in cases for Mr. Holmes. Eventually, I will ask that you please send me your conclusions as to this matter. Mr. Holmes will evaluate your conclusions along with any materials you have received. Okay, that's pretty wonderful. All right, so Watson has laid out the introduction of this case. We're not sure exactly why Holmes thinks this needs a little more investigation, but Watson has already suggested 2 experts that might help us and has volunteered. We know from our past experience that Watson is actually pretty good at getting in contact with experts, and Watson has said so himself. So if there's someone else we think needs to be consulted, Watson has volunteered to do it. Okay, pretty cool. All right, here is our letter from Isabel Harrington. Monday, November 4th, 1889, 6 Clipstone Street, London. Dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I'm in desperate need of your help. I'm sure you receive many letters from jealous women regarding the whereabouts of their husbands. I promise you this is not one of those letters. My husband, Peter, is a good man, and I trust him completely, but he is not himself. I first noticed the change around 2 weeks ago. Peter has always been a loving husband and a wonderful father to our 9-year-old son, Daniel, but lately he has kept entirely to himself. Whenever his shift ends and he returns home, he walks straight into his study and closes the door. In the evening, late into the night, he finally joins me in bed. Every so often he embraces me, but then turns and faces away from me. I'm so worried for him, but whenever I broach the subject, he simply says nothing. A strange incident occurred last Tuesday. A bouquet of red wildflowers was delivered to our door. Naturally, I assumed Peter was apologizing for being so distant. When he arrived home, I ran to him and thanked him for the thoughtful gift, but he looked almost, well, disgusted. He stormed into the parlor, snatched up the flowers, and tossed them into the fireplace. He then locked himself in his study once again. Later that evening, I grew worried, and I went looking for him early in the morning. I found him in our son's room, wide awake, sitting in a chair next to his bed. "There's nothing to worry about," he whispered. "Go back to sleep." Peter works for the Abernathy Carriage Company. He has often confided in me the details of his day and the people he encounters as a result of his profession. Peter's very good at his work because he's kind to the horses and sociable with his passengers. Occasionally, he does complain of rude passengers. It is not unusual for him to receive the occasional scolding. The last of these occurred on a Friday. I think it was October 11th, the last ride of his day. October 11th, so 3 weeks ago or so. I'm embarrassed to say we first met through his line of work 12 years ago. I solicited his carriage after a dreadful evening acquainting myself with a suitor at a Christmas ball. The gentleman spent most of the evening talking about his own field of expertise, something to do with hats, and I decided it best to call a cab in order to escape him. Peter was still a fairly inexperienced driver and managed to get us lost. We spent much of the evening circling the streets of London. I still tease Peter that he intentionally allowed himself to take those many wrong turns. My parents were unhappy at the prospect of such an unequal match, but with money being short and my father in poor health, there was little he could do to prevent the marriage. He reluctantly gave his consent, but neither he nor my mother have written or spoken to me since, so my husband and son are all I have left in the world. There was a short time before this misfortune began when Peter actually seemed a bit brighter than usual. He spent more time with Daniel and spoke about his future. Our Daniel is an intelligent boy, and Peter works as hard as he can to provide for his future and his education. I asked Peter about what had lifted his mood, but he remained tight-lipped on the matter. He was not as evasive then. It was more that he seemed wary of spoiling the surprise. I cannot imagine what has provoked this frightening behavior. I reached out to our friend Edmund Whitcomb for help, to see if there's anything at the cab depot that might be troubling Peter. He offered to help however he can and send his findings to you. Peter is no less a missing person than if he were not even here, so I beg you to help bring him back. Sincerely, Isabel Harrington. Okay, well, that's a pretty great, interesting, perplexing set of initial facts. I mean, you can't ask for too much better than that. Okay. So here's Edmund Whitcomb, a fellow cabbie. Greetings, Mr. Holmes. I'm contacting you at the behest of my friend Isabel Harrington. Frankly, we're quite worried about Peter. I'll provide you with as much information as I can about Peter and the Abernathy Carriage Company, where we both work. I can attest to the fact that Peter is a good man. Whatever this business may be, I trust his intentions completely. I have known Peter for 10 years. He trained me when I started with Abernathy and has often invited me for dinner with his family. He's always treated those around him with kindness and generosity and takes pride in making others happy. Peter is a talented driver. I would call him a horse whisperer. He never has an issue finding fares and has been remarkably consistent in the 10 years I've worked for Abernathy. I wonder sometimes why he doesn't just strike out on his own. He could certainly earn a lot more without Abernathy reaching in his pocket. I suspect it must be loyalty, putting others ahead of himself. All of this is to say there's something strangely amiss from what Mrs. Harrington has told me. I thought it wise to convey to you as much information as possible about our colleagues at Abernathy. We have a front office and occasionally cross paths at the start and close of the day. There are 24 or so drivers. We each tend to cover our own assigned neighborhoods and would be likely to occasionally cross paths with a driver in the adjacent neighborhood. For this reason, I spoke to 3 other drivers from northeast London: Percival Thorne, John Rutherford, and Wilson Whip Merriweather. We all know him as Whip because he's a bit hard on the horses. I recall seeing Peter and Thorne speaking with one another a few times about a month ago. Around that time, Thorne was peddling some kind of financial investment from his uncle Robert. It seemed his uncle was an expert in the trading of commodities, and he was trying to recruit others to invest with him. Thorne tried to approach me with the same investment, but knowing little of finance, I rejected the offer. I could not help but feel sorry for the man, who appeared quite pathetic and desperate. It would not surprise me if Peter attempted to help this man out of his troubles. As for John Rutherford, I do believe Peter sent some of his regular fares to John after an extended absence. This was back in September. Rutherford claimed his absence was related to illness, but the man always appeared to be in good health. It is possible some invisible malady had stricken the man. I have not seen as much of Rutherford as I have of the other drivers, so it is also possible his absences are a more common occurrence. As far as I'm aware, Whip is not an acquaintance of Peter's. It may be worth speaking with him due to their adjacent routes, but Whip is also a man who has his ear on the ground. That is to say, he's a gossiper and loose-lipped. He's not a person I would trust with valuable information, but he may be apprised of rumors if this interests you. He often spends his evenings at the Pickled Egg, a raucous tavern. Now, Mr. Aberney himself isn't quite a man of the people. I've only met him twice. He runs a tight operation and expects his cut of the fares. In exchange, he provides the horses and the carriages. I'd be a bit intimidated to approach the man myself, but perhaps a colleague of yours could inquire further if you deem it relevant. The front office keeps records of fares. All pickup and drop-off locations are recorded in our front office. I would be glad to provide this information, but I fear I may attract attention to Peter if I were to transcribe a large number of pages. If there are any dates or persons of interest, please let me know, and I'll transcribe up to 3 days of fares per correspondence. On a personal note, I'm deeply uncomfortable investigating these matters without Peter's knowledge. I'm no detective, but I shall report back anything I can find to you. I deeply care for the Harringtons and want to be of assistance. If a measured line of questioning is required, one of your agents may yield different results to that effect. Sincerely, Eddie Whitcomb. Okay. So, you couldn't really have asked for a better set of letters. This is as good as any correspondence letter we've gotten in any commercial game. Pretty compelling case. Okay, so before we start talking about the case, I want to take a little time to talk about the system. Now, it's clear that Matt C., who's done this, has thought about this, because he's actually given us some limitations and details here, but actually phrased really perfectly. Whitcomb is saying, hey, look, if you need some fares, recorded fares transcribed, I could go in there and write down a couple of them for you, but I obviously can't sit in there and transcribe the whole thing. And so he said, if you write to me, I can give you a couple days worth of fair listings if they're important. Okay, so that leads us perfectly to the discussion of sort of mechanically how should this work. Now we're going to figure this out together. I mean, Matt C is the boss, but we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to play the case, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the meta issues of the case as we play it. But let me check in with the chat, which I should have done before. Rob says Watson's letterhead is the same as in Dear Holmes, so we know it's the real doc. Jan says, it feels like a full-scale murders by mail. Send Wiggins and others to some places. Yes, it does. It's sort of like a hybrid. Emily says, this sounds and looks so good. You guys are so talented. Okay, well, all credit to Matt for the writing, Debbie to help edit, and Rob for making these letters look so good. Okay, let's talk about well, maybe we should spend a moment in the chat letting Matt bask in some of the credit for this. So Rob and Debbie have both read the letters, so they're not gonna, well, but I guess they haven't read subsequent letters, so they're in the same position now as we are, so they can help with this stuff. But at some point, I don't know if Debbie is going to be let in on the larger plans, and I don't know how much of the rest of the plan for this mystery that Matt has developed or shared with anyone. So I'm not sure Matt has the full mystery planned out or whether it will change as we play, which is what leads us to our next discussion. Okay, so let's talk about this system that we're inventing on the fly. What are the ground rules here? One thing we haven't figured out is, what do we get to do? What should the form of our responses to this letter take? What are our actions? So I think it makes sense to, and I want to hear your feedback on all this too. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my thoughts and you chime in as well. It makes sense that we're treating this seriously as a mail correspondence. So I think that there will be no, and it seems like this is on the same thinking that Matt, there's no fixed rules for actions. Even Matt doesn't say, here are the game rules. There are no game rules per se here. We're going to write a free-form reply to presumably addressed to Watson, but we could divert it. We can talk to Whitcomb or any of these people, and Watson can find other people that we need to talk to. So there is no rule for what we could ask for, but we don't get to do anything. Our actions are writing. We're writing to these people, making requests. If we make a request, go arrest these 5 people, the reply back is going to come, who do you think you're talking to? I don't arrest people. So all we can do is make requests. If we request 100-page interview transcripts, we're likely to get a reply that says, I'm too busy for this. I can't go around doing 100 interviews. So all of the constraints are all soft. They're all based on what the replies we get back. All we can do is make requests. So that's the issue of how we play. Perry says, are we limited to asking Watson questions or asking for something? We're not limited to anything. If we can write it in a letter, we can do it. But what's going to happen when they get that letter depends. If we tell Watson, fly over to Paris, talk to the president of France, he's going to say no. So we can write whatever we want. This is my thinking about it. Okay, Matt is so far pretty much agreed with me. Okay, now Rob says, I think there needs to be a set limit of letters. That's another great question that I have less of a good feel for. How long does this last? How many letters? Now, in Dear Holmes, it was very strict. First, for the first couple of years, it was 4 letters elaborating on the case, and then a 5th solution from Holmes. Now they've moved to 3 letters, and then a 4th letter that's the solution by Holmes. I think it does make sense to have some concept of how long it should take, some expectation. Of course, in a real case, you might not know going into it. Is this going to get wrapped up in 1 week? Or is it going to take 8 months of correspondence? So it's a very interesting question. I think on one hand, the author, Matt, can decide when he's had what his goal is. I don't know if that should be shared with us. I like the idea of it not being strict. So I like the idea, one of the advantages to doing it this way, rather than the Dear Holmes fixed story, is we're a little bit more flexible, and maybe it adds a little bit of interest that we don't quite know when it's going to wrap up. But that does lead, but maybe Matt can decide, okay, I'm going to aim for 3 or 4 cases. But it does then raise a second issue that Rob is talking about, which is, it's not, how do we know when it's finished? How do we know when it's time to offer a solution? What does that look like? And what, I guess this is maybe the hardest nut to crack of this thing, which is, how does this wrap up? So let's think about how Dear Holmes works, and how we played a bunch of the murders by mail cases as well. And in the murders by mail, you just take actions till you're ready to solve it. And then you say, I think I'm going to solve it. In the Dear Holmes, you know that by the time you get the final letter, you've gotten all the information you're going to get, so you should try to come up with your final theories. In this case, and we don't, in Dear Holmes, you can send them your solution, but we don't. We just try to come up with it. Okay, so I was thinking of a final action by us, a final solution here being written in. And I was thinking of taking a page from the game I'm working on, High and Low, where the task you're given is essentially to make recommendations, present your theory of the case, and then lay out any evidence for that. Now, in this case, we're not working directly with the police, but you might, well, Watson has said what he wants. He wants our conclusions he wants our conclusions. So I'm thinking that what we want to be doing here is, when we're ready, when we think we understand what happened, we should be writing our summary conclusions as if we were hired for a job and we're getting paid a fixed amount, say, and we can't have it go on forever. So at some point, we're going to have to decide we know enough, or maybe Watson will say, hey, look, we got to move on to another case. So give me your, so either we're going to be told, hey, it's time to wrap it up, you guys got to send in solution, or we will on our own decide we know enough, and we will present our solution in a formal letter. That's what I think, how I think we should do it. And then we expect some sort of final epilogue letter. Now, one of the advantages to doing this ourselves is, in Dear Holmes, you got 4 letters and they're all big, full letters. The company can't afford you to send you a letter saying, hey, let's go. I need a solution. But here, actually, we can. wait for a letter. Like if we don't come to our solution and get to the finale on our own, Matt can write us a letter from Watson saying, hey, Holmes is ready to close this case. He's figured it out, but he'd like to give you a chance to give your final thoughts. So like a 2-sentence letter. So if we don't promptly solve it, we might expect that we're going to get a letter from Watson saying, you're on the clock. Let's go. Let's hear your solution. So we can not stress out about that. It won't be after a fixed number of letters. It'll just be when we're confident enough to give a solution, or when we get a note from Watson saying it's time. And after all, that's part of the job of being an investigator, is knowing when you got enough information to solve the case. If someone has a better name for this thing that we're doing in generic terms, please let me know. And if someone wants to get started on a second case, it would be, I mean, these play-by-mail cases are very enjoyable. The play-by-mail system, the idea of it, are very enjoyable. So it's amazing that Matt has just come in and started this case on a couple days notice. But if someone else wants to get to work on one, I'll play these till the end of time. Okay. Anything else? That's it. That's it. That's the end of my slides. So now let's chat. Debbie says, okay, let's say, if there's, I think we need a deadline so we don't become multi-month pen pals with Watson. Matt C says, if there's a deadline, I could in theory still provide enough. You could solve it by the last letter. It'll just be a question of how creative you need to be. Jan says, why not multi-month? I liked that, but I would say it's a story dependent. Oh, why not monthly month? Why not multi-month is because Matt can't just write this for months and doing a bit of improv. In fact, where are my other slides? What's happened here? I thought I write more. What have I done here? I see. All right, let me catch you with the chat, then I'll say a couple things I forgot to say. All right. Debbie says, it's a bit much to expect Matt to keep this up for several months. He's not being paid for it after all. That's true. And the idea that you could do this for months completely on the fly without planning out how long it should take, etc. Macon says, Watson could send us a letter saying, well, I think that last letter clears everything up when Matt has had enough. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, if Matt has presented enough, he can complain that we're taking too long to figure it out. Will we get a final reply from Holmes in the end? We will get. I'm hoping we will get a little final epilogue. Will Watson provide clues unsolicited, or will the only clues be in response to questions? Emmy says, aim to finish this before Christmas because real life starts disrupting things for people following along. I think Watson will be I think the clues will come in on their own, and as a result of our requests, it's all completely up to Matt, of course. But I think to keep things on track, it's almost like it's a train that's going to reach the end of its station. Like the information is going to come in from Matt from Watson that this case is going to sort of self-solve if we take too long. That's the idea. In fact, if we never send a reply, you could imagine Watson sends one letter saying, hey, where's your theories? Where's your questions? And then another letter saying, look, you guys, you're taking too long. We found someone else. And then a last letter saying, hey, just in case you're curious, here's how it worked out. So this is a train that's going to get solved on its own according to Matt's desires, plans. If Matt finds that he's going to take a trip, then he'll just wrap it up in one letter saying, sorry, guys, you took too long. Here's how it ended. Just like in real life, he'd say, remember that case I asked for your help on? I don't need it anymore. It wrapped up. For genre name, I call it interactive play by mail. Okay, that's not as bad. That's nice and clean. So I wanted to talk about, I don't know why it wasn't in any of my slides, a couple things. First of all, this reminds me of the poison chocolates case, or case of the poison chocolates case. Where is my author of that? Didn't I write it down at some point? Anthony Berkeley. This was a book that Jonathan found for his book club. And the setup is so nice. It's like a club of amateur detectives, and they try to solve a real case. And day one starts, they all meet, they discuss it, then they go off, and then they take turns. And you're reading this book, and the first guy comes in the next day, he says, I hate to do this to you guys because I feel guilty. I'm the first one, but I've solved it. And he lays out his solution and his evidence and what he gathered, and he presents a very compelling case. And you're like, that's it. It's solved. He figured it out. And then they meet the next day, and the next detective's turn it is, and she dismantles the previous guy's total case and explains why it's completely wrong, and then presents her theory. Next detective comes, does the same thing. And it's wonderful to have the case presented be so compelling, and then it gets totally demolished by the next person. So one of the things we don't know, but I think is an opportunity here, is how much Matt wants to have a fixed idea here for a case, a fixed story, versus a story that morphs behind the scenes according to our theories. And that's one of the real advantages to this format. I hope Matt can take advantage of it. So whereas you can imagine three scenarios. One is Dear Holmes, every letter is written out fully ahead of time. The second scenario is much more like the Murders by Mail, where there is a story, there is a right answer pre-scripted, everything, the evidence is pre-scripted, but then the authors have planned for replies to some of our actions. But the third possibility here, which I hope Matt will take some advantage of, is the ability to improvise the story, even the solution, based on our theories and requests. And I called a similar idea of this when we played one of the Dear Holmes case, a glitch mystery, a term I've come up with to describe a mystery where the writer doesn't have a solution in mind yet, just throws together a bunch of contradictory, weird clues, and then watches and figures out a solution at the end, perhaps based on theories that people propose. And I do hope Matt will keep an open mind to the idea of listening to our theories and tweaking it. So, for example, if we decided right now, okay, the solution to this is he's got a twin who got lost in the war and has come back and plans to abduct the wife and kid, Matt could listen to that and be like, wow, they figured it out on the first letter, and then just completely change it to make it harder. But there are some problems with this approach, and the channel is already mentioning some of them. Macon says, stories that morph end up like Lost, where the writers realize people on the internet have figured out where it's going, and then they change course with interesting results, says Macon. Yeah, that can be a little disturbing. Isara says, it would be interesting if while the wife is investigating the husband contacts him to investigate the wife. Yeah, okay, so you could look at it the other way. Rather than morphing it away from our theories, Matt could realize, hey, someone in the chat came up with a very cool idea. Let me write that in. But anyway, so going back to this idea of improvising it on the fly as we go, you could imagine how different ways that could go very wrong. In that it could go on forever. Whatever we propose gets invalidated. So this is where the question becomes, what is Matt's role? Is his role to make this case as challenging as possible so that whatever theory we come up with, the next letter is going to disprove it, like the poison chocolates case? Or is Matt's role to stick to his thing? And I think probably the best approach is for Matt to balance his time. So when he feels like it's time to wrap it up, and maybe play the role of sort of a dungeon master, a game master, whose goal is to sort of maximize our satisfaction and maximize us feeling clever. So I think maybe Matt's going to have to sort of read the room and see how good do we feel about our theory? How satisfying would it be to be correct about theories? And he may have to do a little improvising based on our requests. Maybe our requests, Matt will have to decide. If we request do these things and they're all like, according to Matt's pre-designed story, they're all would be very boring replies, maybe he'll change up the case a little bit so the replies will be a little more interesting. But I think it is going to come down to a little bit of a pacing issue. When Matt feels the time is right to be like, yes, you've figured out, you've solved it, he can let us know, or maybe give us hints that we're on the right trail, that there's not much to figure out. One of the big challenges for all of these games is when you play, how do you know you're done? How do you know you've found all there is to find? And maybe one of the advantages of this interactive thing is to Matt can figure out how he's going to give us hints that we're done. Sounds like the channel might be a little bit of a disagreement with me about the idea of improvising on the solution. Debbie says, I'm with Macon on this. Stories like that don't tend to end up very well. The Poison Chocolates case did have a particular solution in mind from the start, despite the different theories. I'm not sure I believe that, but you've got a good point. I could go, I mean, it's going to be up to Matt, but I would be happy to play a game where no matter what our theory was as we went along, the next letters always disproved it. And just as an experiment to see how far down to the rabbit hole do you get where there's a plausible theory that just keeps adapting as we guess. But I think it's going to be up to Matt. Rob says, I think the general idea of the case needs to be fixed so clues can be handed out at a good pace, but the replies can focus on different things depending on what we reply. Macon says, I think the solution should be set, but maybe multiple clues to take us where depending on who we spoke to. Debbie says, yes, you can have a fixed solution and improvise along the way. All right, well, I mean, it's up to Matt. If I'm talking to Matt directly, I don't think you should feel constrained by that. I think if you want to change the solution midway, you should feel free to do it. And I have no problem with that, but it's up to you. Emmy says, ideally you have 2 or 3 possible solutions in mind and fix on one after a couple of letters. That sounds a little bit better to me. And I think I like the idea of being able to improvise details of the crime and however much of it you feel inspired to improvise depending on our replies. All right, so we've got we could chat a little bit more. It's only been 45 minutes. I think I was thinking we might go an hour and a half or so, but let's see. We've got 22 concurrent viewers, 16 likes. If you like this idea, you want to see more of these videos, please do give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. If you're new joining us, I'd love to have you say hello, introduce yourself if you want to, any projects you're working on, commercial, hobby, artistic, whatever. We'd love to hear it. But chat should keep coming up with ideas here to help Matt have some ideas about how this developed. And then we'll try to formulate our reply here. We're going to have to circle back to this actual case in a minute. I just want to give the chat any more time to talk about the general concept of this game before we dig back into the specifics. Rob says, the problem is we need clues to have a fair play chance to figure it out. If the solution morphs midway, previous clues might be nullified. So there's no solid clues to a new solution. Well, this would be the challenge for the author. If you improvise the story, you'd still have to make it consistent with and aided by the different clues. But you could imagine where we theorize 2-3 possible reasons for a certain piece of evidence or clue, and Matt could listen to those and say, oh, okay, that one sounds more plausible. Or maybe, as frequently happens in these games, we say, oh, that wouldn't happen. Here's why. And Matt might say, oh, yeah, they're right. I was planning on this, but they've come up with a convincing reason why that makes no sense, and then just adapt around it. So I do hope that Matt will take advantage of our theorizing to tune and tweak up the mystery. All right, shall we proceed back to the letter and try to come up with our theories and requests? Any final thoughts about the system, the idea, before we go back to the letter? And of course, we can discuss this stuff offline, either in the Board Game Geek Guild forum section or in the Discord. Rob says, yes, part of the author adapting is good. Would have been very useful in Dear Holmes with the more outlandish motives. Yes, it would have been useful to avoid some of the more silly things in Dear Holmes. Okay. Let's go through our letters again, make notes, and remember, we're going to formulate a reply directed to Watson, but asking for more information, asking these people, Isabel, Edmund, maybe some of the other drivers, for information. And if we ask for too much, we're not going to get it. So let's try to not go crazy. We're going to look like amateurs if we ask Watson for 100 things. All right, so we've got a man, a husband, who's not missing, but has changed. Peter Harrington, that's our guy. We've got a letter from various people. Okay, and then Watson says, we've also got Wiggins to run errands for us. If we have another expert we need, that's fine. Now, I mean, not to point out the obvious, but it would seem to me like the right thing to do would be to call. He's not actually missing. He's just acting weird. It seems like maybe the right thing to do would be go right to Peter and say, what's going on? We're just going to have to assume that she's tried that everyone's tried that he's not saying anything. Otherwise, this whole case is silly. So we're going to assume he doesn't want to talk about it. And that's pretty damning evidence on its own that this is serious. Like, why you would think of it. If you're like, if you're having some marital issues, like you're in a bad mood, you're not talking to your wife, that's understandable. Like she says, hey, let's talk about it. You're like, I don't want to talk about it, whatever. Once Sherlock Holmes gets brought into the picture, that's probably when you're like, okay, I guess I got to explain that I'm worried about getting fired or whatever. Like, once Sherlock Holmes comes into the picture, that's when you realize, okay, I've got to come clean. I've lost some money gambling. So it better be pretty serious if Peter Harrington is not willing to disclose. Although he doesn't know Holmes has been called in, but she obviously is concerned enough. But we have to assume it's pretty serious. All right. Now, what does Isabel tell us? Maybe we need to start developing a timeline. November 4th is Isabel's letter. Okay. She says, doesn't have to do with being jealous. Although Watson says, hey, she might not realize he could be having an affair. That's the part about might not realize, but she's concerned. Okay, 9-year-old son. So they've been married for a long time. They've got a son, Daniel, but he's acting strange. There must be some reason Holmes has taken this case. Holmes's intuition has told him that this is a serious case. Because otherwise, if someone wrote to you, you're like the world famous detective, and someone's like, my husband won't talk to me much, you'd be like, handle this on your own. I got bigger fish to fry. But Holmes has picked up something's going on here. Something has caught his attention. Okay, he's still working his job. He's still doing fine, but he occasionally embraces her, but then he turns and faces away. But I mean, she's seeing him every morning and stuff. It's not like his face is disfigured. So this just is him being distant, it seems like. He won't talk about it. Then she says, a strange incident occurred last Tuesday. So it's Monday, November 4th. So last Tuesday is the strange incident with red wildflowers. That's pretty cool. Red wildflower delivery. Okay, well, so my immediate thing is let's find the delivery records. Let's contact the flower delivery people and see if we can figure out who sent these. But before we do that, maybe we need a separate piece of paper with our suggested actions. So I'm just going to write here, all up on delivery. What's nice about this is because it's so open-ended, we'll have to figure out how to write to Watson. Like, you could, depending on how much we trusted Watson, we could say, hey, go find out who delivered those flowers. But maybe we feel like we better give him more guidance or he won't be able to do it. And we'll have to deal with that in a second. Now, what's the date of that? Let's not leave things to chance. Last Tuesday would be 6 days ago. So is that October 29th? October 29th was a Tuesday. Then October 4th would be a Tuesday. So that make it October 28th. 9, 30, 31. First, second, third. No, that would make it the 30th. 30th is a Tuesday. 31st, Wednesday. First, Thursday. Second, Friday. Third, Saturday. Why is this so hard for me? Can someone help me out here? I'm just so bad with these dates things. So 7 days previous. It's embarrassing. And no one is saving me from this embarrassment in the channel. 28th, 30th. Okay, channel's gonna fill me in on that. I just can't do it on the fly for some reason. All right. I bought the wildflowers. She naturally assumes they're from him. That makes sense. He looked almost disgusted. Why is he disgusted about the flowers? Well, he knows what they're about, surely. He snatched them up, tossed them into the fireplace. That's our biggest clue right there. Why is he disgusted? And then there's another piece of this clue. Before I do it, let me check in with the chat. November the 29th was a Tuesday. Okay. No, that does not help. Just say November the 29th. You mean October the 29th was a Tuesday. 30, 31, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is Tuesday. Yes. Okay. October 29th. October 29th. Okay, let's see. What will the format of the reply be? A full page letter back sounds a bit much. Definitely need a list of fares. Proceeding is change of behavior from the other driver. Here is my original reply. Put Wiggins on whip 24/7. The investment lead seems obvious one. Boy, you guys are just jumping ahead. All right, you're jumping ahead too far. I got to go back and do it. I think. Does the red flowers mean something like a threat? Maybe something to do with the sun. Do the flowers look like some kind of warning? What was it? 5 seeds of pumpkin in some case. Having made bad investments seems too easy a solution. Doesn't explain the flowers. I was thinking it did, actually. Let me... your channel is jumping ahead too much for me. I'm going to turn away. I'm turning off the chat. You guys are going too far on your own. Let's stop for a second. Isara says, could the flowers... Where's my thing so I can highlight the questions that are not... Highlight the comments that are not insubordinate. Well, so a couple people said something and I had a slightly different theory. Remember the tulip craze, the tulip investments, and the Dutch tulip story has been a story that gets used to show how crazy investments go. So I wonder, is it possible that our guy has invested in some like wildflower tulip craze and is losing all his money, and then like these wildflowers get sent as like samples from the investment and he's like disgusted by it? It didn't seem like a romantic thing. I wonder if he's like, this damn investment and the flowers are related to the investment. Emily says he's described as friendly and talks to a lot of passengers. Maybe he saw or heard something he shouldn't. Yeah, except he doesn't seem scared and nervous. He's just distant here. Okay, well, this is our first clue about the flowers. Now let's read the second part again. He locked himself away. Okay, so maybe he is a little nervous. He locked himself. I went looking for him. I found him in our son's room, wide awake, sitting in the chair next to his bed. There's nothing to worry about. Go back to sleep. So he's wide awake with his son in the son's room. Why is that? He says there's nothing to worry about. That's not exactly reassuring. On the other hand, he doesn't look scared. She doesn't describe him as being scared, does she? He's disgusted and distant, but not scared. Or he's hiding it well, but don't you think she would notice that? But maybe he's just hiding it. Okay, now let's continue going on here. He occasionally gets rude passengers, completely normal. Okay, then she describes a particular cab ride. Okay, so I'm going to put down in our clues here. He's disgusted by the flowers. He burns them. And then son's room. Nothing to worry about. Doesn't seem nervous. That confuses me. The flowers aren't a warning if he doesn't seem nervous, or he's a very brave guy. Okay, then we've got our October 11th fare, which he obviously told her about. Okay, let me read about this. And then she doesn't say more about it. Occasionally he complains of rude passengers, not often, but now he did. Friday, October 11th. I mean, it doesn't... 3 weeks before the flowers and stuff? 2 weeks before the flowers? I mean, I guess it's a lead we may want to follow up. It just doesn't jump out at me as being particularly relevant, but it certainly could be. She tells us how they met, how they've got an unequal match. Okay. So he doesn't have lots of money. And then this part is quite interesting. This is the part that leads us to think investment. He seemed brighter than usual. And in the end, she says he seemed wary of spoiling a surprise. Like he's invested all their money. He's invested Daniel's college fund in some investment. Spoke about his future. So he's got some future plan for Daniel. He's got his future plan for the college fund for Daniel. Intelligent boy. That's what I think. I think he invested the college fund and was very happy about how well it was going. After we finish the case, Rob is going to come talk to us, in a month's time and tell us about how close we were sometimes and how he changed. Rob, try to keep a little diary. Not Rob, Matt C. Keep a little diary of your reflections on our theories and how you had to change things so we know when we were getting warmer or colder, whatever. At the end, Peter works as hard as he can to provide for his future and his education. Asked Peter what lifted his mood, but he's tight-lipped. Yeah, because he's invested the money. He doesn't want to give it. He doesn't want to jinx it. He doesn't want to say I've invested all our money in a tulip, the next coming of the wildflower tulip craze. I'll tell you after the money comes in. Things have gotten bad, though. Okay, how old is the son? The son was 9 years old, we're told. Okay, then she talks to the Edmund Whitcomb, who now talks to us. She says, I love this part here. Peter is no less a missing person than if he were not even here. Okay, then we've got Whitcomb's letter. All right, before I read Whitcomb's letter, let's check in with the chat again, see if people are calming down a little bit. Jen says, why invest resources to scare a cab driver? Did he see something, or that could the flowers symbolize something, sending a message? Talks to a lot of passengers. Maybe he saw something he shouldn't have. Someone could try talking to the son, see if he's overheard anything. Why would he say you've got nothing to worry about? Is the son worried? Why would he say to his son, you've got nothing to worry about? I'm not sure that's what I'm not sure he was saying that to his son, but maybe that's worth looking at. Let's read this part again. He locked himself into the study after the flowers. Okay, later that evening I grew worried. I went looking for him early in the morning. I found him in our son's room, wide awake, sitting in a chair next to his bed. There's nothing to worry about, he whispered. Go back to sleep. So that's a little ambiguous. It's a good observation about the whispered, though. But is he talking to the son? Is he whispering to the son or whispering to the wife? That's the part I'm not sure. Is he sitting next to the son? The wife comes in and he says, there's nothing to worry about. He says to her quietly, go back to sleep. Is he talking to the wife or the son? It's not clear to me. What is your reading of that? When I read it, I thought he was talking to the wife. Let me see what the chat thinks. And by the way, this is the ground rules of this are obviously that Matt cannot clarify anything. If Matt is reading, watching us, he can't say, oh no, I meant this. Obviously we got this letter, we don't have access real time to Watson. All right, let me see the theories here. Macon says he doesn't need to whisper to his son if he's awake. Nice point. Emmy says talking to the wife so as not to wake the son is how I read it. So Emmy is thinking like me, and Macon is as well, but Macon is giving us a good piece of hard evidence why we know he's not talking to his son. Because if he was talking to his son, he wouldn't say, go back to sleep. He wouldn't have to whisper to his son. Very, very good. I love it. Macon is actually really nicely on point. If the son is awake, he wouldn't have to whisper to the son, go back to sleep. If the son is asleep and he's talking to the wife, then he has a reason to whisper. Okay. So I think he's I'm stuck. I'm perseverating on the fact that he's invested the kids' college fund. That's why he's sitting in the kids' room, like ruminating on what he's done, and he's too ashamed to look the wife in the face. That's the reason you don't look the wife in the face, because you're ashamed of what you've done with their money, and you've walked into this marriage on financial lesser level. So like there's some pressure on you. If you've lost money, that's really going to make you ashamed. Especially like if he was a rich man, that would be different, but he's not rich. He's married into some wealth. So I think that's why you don't look the wife in the face, because you're ashamed. Jan says, well, sometimes you're telling the kid to go back to sleep really quietly. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. You could be like, you don't want to fully wake him up. But the fact that the wife walked in the room, I still think the wife is the best guess. But okay. Now let's read Edmund Whitcomb, who lives on 49 George Street. Let's read what he says. We're both worried about Peter. He's a good man. I trust his intentions completely. Okay. 10 years, he trained him, always treated everyone with kindness, takes pride in making others happy. He's a talented driver. Why doesn't he strike out? Because he's loyal. Okay. It's a bunch of drivers. They cross paths. And 3 other drivers this guy's telling us about that we might need to talk to in different areas of London. Percival Thorne, John Rutherford, and Wilson Whip Merriweather. Okay, now, Peter and Thorne speaking with one another a few times about a month ago. Okay, so that would be about October 4th. Before any trouble. What does Isabel say when all this started? She doesn't really say, 2 weeks ago. Sorry, I almost missed that. 2 weeks ago. So change started maybe October 14th or 16th or so. Okay, so that's important. 2 weeks ago. That's important. So this guy says they were having this talk a month ago. So 2 weeks before he started acting weird. Thorne peddling some kind of financial investment. So here's my number one thing I want to talk to. If my theory is right, he's invested in some bad financial deal. I want Thorne talked to from his Uncle Robert. Okay. So on my list of follow-up, this is Percival Thorne. Sounds like someone who would give you bad investment advice. One of the nice things about being able to play this as a sort of improv case is like when you're playing when you're playing a game like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective or Murders by Mail, whatever, you're just like, my action is go here. But when we're writing to Watson, we can be like, look, seriously, this is the most important part. Press him on this. Don't take no for it. We can like emphasize some details. Like sometimes you read the reply, you're like, why did you just leave? You didn't even ask her where she was. But when we write the letter, we could be like, I want you to check these things off the list. Make sure you get them right. All right, let's see. Rob says, I'm not buying the financial troubles theory. It doesn't explain the flowers. Macon says, yeah, it's darker than that. Someone's threatening his son, so he sits guard, says Rob. This is where Matt can be picking up some of these ideas. Debbie says, is this going to be similar to Murders by Mail where we can send different people to follow up on separate leads? We can do whatever we can request whatever we want. What actually happens is up to Matt. Rob says, we need a limit on how much we can ask of Watson. Maybe just one thing per reply. This is where I'm disagreeing. We don't need a limit on how much we can ask of Watson. I disagree with Rob. It's just that he's not going to do everything. Anything we put in our letter is just a request or a recommendation. And if we put 10 things, not only is Watson only going to do one of them, but we're probably going to get a complaint back. So there doesn't have to be hard rules about what we can request, but it's just like a regular thing. If you ask your friend to go shopping for you and get you 50 things, your friend is going to say no, which is what Watson's going to say if we go crazy. John says, I wonder whether he put a deposit on the investment and the flowers are a message to pay up on the rest or his son gets attacked. I don't buy. John says, maybe he could have prearranged the flowers to arrive on the date he thought the investment was going to pay out, then forgot he had ordered them. And he says, could we give him something general, like speak to the cab drivers and maybe who to go first? We can say whatever we want. Debbie says, maybe one lead for Watson, one for Wiggins, and one for Wickham. No. We do whatever we want. But what happens, we're going to get a bad reputation if we say a million things. So, and the reply may come like, I've done this. I haven't gotten around to this yet. Or the reply might come, hey, you suggested this, but Sherlock said, don't bother. So we can put whatever we want, but we got to be reasonable people. Rob says, in that case, ask Watson to send us 1,000. Well, we could ask for some money. Let's see. Maybe that will work. You never know. We have no idea what's going to happen with our replies. We could ask him to send us a book. Maybe we'll get a book from England. We don't know. Let's go back to our letter here, though. Okay, so Percival Thorne and his uncle Robert. This is my most curious thing. His expert in the trading of commodities. Hello, is not commodities like the tulips? Does this not lead evidence to my theory? Is the commodities are like those kinds of things, right? What would we call a commodity? We can do internet lookup here. I guess it's the 1800s. There's no internet. Who knows about the story of the Dutch tulip craze and how insane it is? Maybe we'll talk about it next time. Macon says, you're really fixated on the tulips. It's true. I'm just pursuing this idea. Now, let's continue here for a second, because while Peter Harrington doesn't want to tell us about it, and maybe Percival won't want to admit if it's a failure, but it says trying to recruit others to invest with him. Thorne tried to approach me with the same investment, but I rejected the offer. So we could ask Whitcomb more details. Maybe Whitcomb actually knows some more details about this investment, if that's our theory. It's certainly my theory. Rob says, the wife is getting slowly poisoned with tulips. Case closed. Okay. Commodity is any kind of trade goods, really. Okay. The tulips were early derivatives trading. I guess they were. The tulips were people buying them because they thought they would go up in price and thought they'd be able to sell them for more, and it just chain reacted until it collapsed. Okay, John Rutherford. Peter sent some of his regular fares to John after an extended absence. This is an interesting thing about the absence, but we don't know anything about it. It's interesting that there's all this mention of his absence, but we have no reason to believe that's related, although it could be tied to our 2 weeks ago thing. But he says, now Whip doesn't know Peter. They're not friends, but they work right next door, and he's got his ear to the ground, the underworld, so to speak. He's a gossiper. Don't trust him with valuable information, but he might have rumors. And he spends his evening at the Pickled Egg. Okay, so there's our Whip. There's Rutherford. As for the boss of the place, this guy says, cool, he's a little intimidated. This feels like, this is the kind of thing that Anna would say, like, this guy can't go talk to his boss and ask him questions. Make him reluctant to talk to the boss. Okay, the front office keeps records of fares, pickup and drop-offs. Okay, so if we're concerned about this case that Isabel talks about, she gives us the exact date when he was chewed out by a passenger. Which happened a little bit before he started acting up. Then we could ask for this information from Edmund. And then Edmund says, I don't like investigating behind his back. Now, what is this about? He says, I'm deeply uncomfortable investigating these matters without Peter's knowledge. I'm no detective, but I shall report back anything I found. Now he says, I deeply care for the Harringtons. What does this part mean? If a measured line of questioning is required, one of your agents may yield different results to that effect. What is your reading of this sentence? What does this mean? Perry says, if this is all about a bad investment, I'll be seriously disappointed. Too obvious from the start. Needs to be deeper. Please do not jinx my theory. Please do not jinx my theory. You're going to have Matt change the theory away. I've argued about the improv. Now I can see. I figured it out, and now it's going to be evolved away from my theory. Whip is a budget Porky Shinwell. I think that's right. Debbie has something very clever. Debbie says, not only ask Whitcomb to follow up on Thorne, but pretend to have changed his mind about the investment. I love it. That's the kind of thing you couldn't do in a normal game, but because we're the way we're playing this, we can suggest that he talk to Thorne, pretend he's interested. That's a great idea. Megan says we should send Watson to Amsterdam to speak to the tulip growers. Okay, so as far as this theory, it seems like Debbie has an idea about this. Debbie says, I think he's saying if we want to question someone in the traditional way, we should ask someone else to do it. And then ME is saying it's a more general hint that different people to different places. It does sound like he's saying he doesn't really want to be involved in this too much, which is a little tricky for us. So it's certainly possible if we ask him to do something, he's going to say, I can't do it. I don't feel good about this. All right. So let's think about what we want to ask of people. So we're gonna. All right. Why don't we get up our? Let's just bring it up here. Okay. Let's see if we can do this together. All right. We're gonna sort of start composing. Where's my? We're gonna start composing this. Debbie was saying. Someone was saying. Okay. Do we have a title for this case? I think we did, but I've forgotten what Matt said it was. Okay. Okay, we have received your letters concerning the strange case of Peter Harrington. Never solve the mystery. Okay. Chat says, can we ask Wiggins and his crew to tell Peter if he's acting strange? We want to see where he goes and who he speaks to. Good thought, M.E. Macon says, I like it. Okay. So this is the kind of thing we could do with this letter. Okay. So I like it. Let's try out. Never to solve the mystery. Guess we should say efficiently. Not the most elegant way to write a letter, but that's part of our task, is to solve it efficiently. Okay. I have a few requests. Convenient. I have a few requests. Make. We can flower this. We can make the language sound a little bit better later. We have a few requests we would ask you to pass along. Okay, and now let's just make him a nice clean bulleted list so he doesn't get distracted. Okay, first, for Edmund, I guess he's Eddie. Okay, so for Eddie Whitcomb is agreeing to make some transcriptions, right? Okay. Shall we ask him first to, let me check with the chat. Let's see. Trying to break into a study, check what he's hiding there. No, we're not going to ask the wife to break in. We could ask Wiggins to try and befriend Daniel. The son might perceive something about his father. Father might not be on guard. I don't think we can have Wiggins go talk to this guy at his house and try to befriend him. That's too invasive. They obviously don't want to involve Peter Harrington too much. All right, how about this? I'm just going to write out some drafts. You see if you agree with me. Could you check the cab log for, let's see, for a fare for Peter Harrington fare on October 11, thereabouts. Fares on October 11th, thereabouts, if And then we're going to tell them a little bit about what we're looking for in case something. Last ride of the day. There we go. There we go. That's important because if we just sent this, he'd say there's too many. But for the last ride of the day for Peter Harrington. I think he may have gotten into an argument with the fair. Okay, and that's our first request for Eddie Whitcomb. And then we're going to say also, Phil, can you elaborate any details you remember of the financial of the investment scheme that Percival Thorne approached you with? And then, based on the suggestion in the chat, if you feel comfortable, approach him and tell him you have reconsidered the offer and like more details. Okay, so there's our Eddie Whitcomb. Details on the investment and whether you might get some further information on Uncle Robert. Okay, remember he says Uncle Robert has the investigation. Uncle Robert's business. Okay. All right. Let's check in with the chat. The text does strongly hint at cab records are important, need to be looked at. Someone being rude to him on October 11th feels like a real stretch to me. I agree with you, Macon, but it does feel like we might as well ask, do we want to follow up on the flower delivery? We absolutely do. Okay, now who are we going to ask about the flower delivery? That's going to be, let's have Wiggins do that. Wiggins is very good at tracking things down. For Wiggins, or yourself, we are particularly interested in finding the sender of the red wildflowers to the Harrington household on, what does she say? Last Tuesday, which is the 29th. On Tuesday, the October 29th. If possible, can you track down the florist or delivery service and get a name, address for the sender? Red wildflowers. Okay. Now, suggest Wiggins might have best persuasive look. Don't hesitate to drop Holmes' name. Okay. Let's just say, I mean, we're trying to give him some information here. If not possible to track down sender info, any information about likely source would be welcome. Okay. Next. What's next? Case of the terrible tulip tragedy. Can we retcon the letters so it wasn't wildflowers but tulips? Okay. What was our next thing? We could, I mean, Percival Thorne is in the list of people. We could ask him directly about the investments. I don't know if that's asking too much of Watson. Let's see. We've already asked Edmund. Okay. Let's see. We'll make a little note. Side note. Watson. Eddie seems reluctant or unsuccessful with Thorne. Perhaps you could follow up with him directly. Try to ascertain more details about the investment scheme. Okay. Just in case Eddie wants to be busy with the cablogs and doesn't want to get involved with this stuff. All right. Now, I want to ask Watson a couple more questions. Watson, as you know, financial stress is often a cause for marital difficulties. Would it be possible for you to inquire around your banking connections to see if Harrington's financial situation has changed recently last month? He might not be able to do that. In addition, have you any background information on wildflower investments? Am I asking too much? I'm like asking Watson to solve it for me. I just thought maybe he would know a little bit about the tulips. Yes. Have you heard about any flower related investment. Are we going to look stupid if we ask him about that? Yes. Have you read about the tulip mania? Tulip mania financial travesty many years ago. Quite fascinating. Okay. Let's see. Tulips are not wildflowers. Yes, I know. I'm just saying it could be related. Could be a similar thing. All right. So I've come up with a letter. It doesn't seem like it's asking too much of Watson or Eddie, but I haven't asked for any information from the other three drivers. I'm trying to not be greedy. I suppose we don't know what they were talking about with Thorn. Let's maybe we're gonna add another little note. For Percival, I feel like he's not gonna want to talk to all of these people. We might be asking him too much. Okay. If you have time, it would be nice to hear from Percival Thorne himself what he and Harrington had been discussing so often in the last month. All right. Oh, have Peter followed. Yes. Okay. Um okay. I'm suggesting that Wiggins talk to the track down. All right. So maybe I'm going to get rid of this part. I'm going to get rid of the part where we suggest Wiggins might be best for the forest. Maybe he knows his business. Okay. Here we go. So if you believe it can be done, what do we want to say? You believe it can be done in a, well, I believe it can be done tactfully. We would like to have Peter Harrington tailed, just Williams for this. See if his daily routine, if he engages in anything unusual. Understand this may be difficult given his day job. I think that's unlikely to yield good results because it's going to be so hard to tail him. But we can give it a try. Don't waste. I mean, it's asking a little much to ask this guy to be tailed. But understand this may be difficult given his day job. may not be practical. We could have Wiggins take a cab ride and quiz him. Is there anything we'd want to ask him as a stranger? We obviously don't want to alert him that he's being investigated because that wife doesn't want that. I want to make a suggestion. To here for Wiggins. An odd idea. If Wiggins feels up for an acting challenge, an odd alternate idea. I mean, at some point, Watson's like, "You're right. These are two. I don't have time to read this long email. So, but we'll just this long message. We'll try." I'm going to suggest have him hail a ride with Harrington and try to engage him in a discussion of investment possibilities. And I'd like to get some idea of whether he has gotten himself into a bad investment. Gauge him conversation about investment. I mean, we are told he's a talkative guy. Let's see what the chat says. Wouldn't Watson be better at this? He'd be more accustomed to making small talk with drivers. You're right. Wiggins is too young for this. Let's change this over to Watson. If you feel up to some legwork, might you hail a ride with Harrington as a undercover as a businessman? Good. Okay. Perhaps I'll put Wiggins back on this. Wiggins on this. He is good at talking shopkeepers into giving him personal details they might otherwise be reluctant to. At some point, Watson's going to be like, we're trying to be clever with these mails. At some point, Watson's going to be like, I don't have time to read these long emails. We got a lot of cases. Please be more brief. Okay. Is there anything else we want to is there anything else we want to ask anyone else to do? I mean, it seems like we might ask Isabel a final question. Like, Isabel, Since we're writing to Watson, I guess I could say side note. I think probably we should is there anything we want to ask Isabel? I don't know if he's going to be able to pass along all this stuff, but anything we want to ask Isabel? Can we get a better description for the flowers? Okay. let's try a little bit of talk with Isabel. First, can you remember anything more about the red wildflower incident? You remember any more details about the red wildflower incident, red wildflower delivery, or any similar incident? And is there anything we could ask her to follow up on? We realize this is a delicate matter, but can you talk in general terms about the financial about Peter's financial status of the household, especially with regard to young Daniel's educational expenses. I want to get a feel for if there's some financial difficulty in the house. Rob says, if Watson addresses all of our questions, his next reply will be 25 pages long. Well, maybe we will get it solved by the next letter. Or maybe Watson will say a couple people were busy, or maybe he'll say it's going to take a couple weeks. I'm going to send multiple replies. Maybe prioritize our questions. That's not a bad idea about prioritizing. Debbie says Isabel could talk to her son, perhaps. It's not a bad idea. Let me just add another comment for Isabel. In addition, if you get the opportunity to ask Daniel if his father has discussed any problems. You know what? I'm going to get rid of this because she would have already asked him about this. She's clearly... Okay, I'll put it. As mentioned, any troubles. Okay. This PS about the tulips, he's going to be like, guys, really? All this isn't enough? All right, do we want to make any of these our most important thing? I think we're going to get a reply that says, please keep your mails shorter. Like, this is too long a flowery message to Watson. They don't have time to read these long letters. Matt could just pick whatever appeals to him the most. Well, absolutely. Remember, this is just our reply to a busy person. He may say, for all we know, Watson's going to say, look, I don't have time to read your full letter. I just did a couple things on my own, or I skimmed it and did a couple. That's completely reasonable. We have no control. These are not things we're going to get answers to. It's out of our control. It's just our letter. Maybe Watson will get back to us and let us know some suggestions for the future. Maybe we're going to get fired. It wouldn't be too surprising if Watson wrote back and said, we made a mistake. You guys are not really ready to be working this case with us. You're asking much too much from us. You should be doing this research on your own. I don't have time for this. Very possible. And Tina says, what is this mess about tulip mania? Debbie says, I think we should get rid of the part about the banking connections. Watson has no reason to have any. All right. I think you might be right about that. Let's not make ourselves look stupid by asking Watson for something that he clearly can't do. You're right. Holmes could get some banking information. Watson can't, especially on such skimpy grounds. All right, I'm getting rid of the part about... asking Watson to investigate his banking information. You can't do that. You can't do that on such small basis. Then we says, have to run, looking forward to hearing the characters reacting, like if the husband tells Isabel about the famous Dr. Watson was in his cab the other day. All right. I'm not convinced the cabbie would have a bank account. That's family has a bank account. The cabbies do pretty well for themselves. Important, the investment and tracking down the sender of flowers. Okay. Let's see. Do we need to say... to summarize... Watson. Our top priorities are the flower delivery and the thorn investment. Time is short. Well, let's just we'll give him our top priorities. There we go. Good. All right. Anything else? I mean, John says maybe we could pick one priority per letter. I think for most part, just letting Matt C go with what inspires him will result in the most. For sure, Matt should figure out what to talk about. Okay. Jonathan doesn't have a bad idea. Our top priority, let's do it this way. How about Watson? One, the flower delivery, and two, the Thorn investment scheme. Please prioritize those in that. I can't keep writing him. It's too much. He's not going to read everything. I can't just keep, like, I want to tell him little subtle details, but that's what I do in my real emails. And people get overloaded. It's like, hey, here are my top 1 and 2 priorities. And if the time is short and you have to consider, please look at 1 and 2. If you can't do number 2, then do number 1. At some point, all the little subtle details you're explaining are overload. So 1 and 2, he's got it. We'll follow up with some of this other stuff later. I feel pretty good about it. Now, last thing, having said all that, this is our first chance to talk to Sherlock Holmes. Is there anything else we want to mention to him? Debbie says, Jesse, see above. All right, there's something I've missed. Let's see, what have I missed? The investment in tracking down the sender of flowers. I think we should get rid of the part about banking connections. I've done that. Send me a Google Doc of this and I'll tidy it up. Sounds good. Try to put some sugar on it. Make it so Watson will like it. Just ask Watson to watch the video. Record with film stock this 2-hour discussion and send that to Watson. All right, we're going to wrap it up here. 1 hour, 59 minutes. That sounds about right. 20 concurrent viewers, 23 likes. That's pretty wonderful. Anyone else want to say anything more? We're done with the case. Debbie's going to clean up the letter and mail it to Matt. Sherlock Holmes, I mean, Watson. And we'll get a better feel with our reply how this is going to go. Hopefully next week, but you never know. It could be a month before we get our reply. That's totally out of our control, and it's a little more open-ended system. Rob says, let Debbie edit the reply and post it on Board Game Geek somewhere. That's a great idea. But the one ground rules, I can set a couple of the ground rules for this. One of the ground rules is we formulate the letter live. We're not going to add information and ideas after the video. So Debbie can tweak the letter, but no adding of new ideas to it, no requests. That's, if we think of one, it's too late. The letter's in the mail. We'll have to follow up on our next letter if we think of something new we want to talk about. Anything else to talk about before we go? Mark Poole says, good session today. Thorne's uncle is going to be Robert Ponzi. I do hope we get some information about that other scheme. I really feel solidly about the idea that Harrington is ashamed rather than being threatened. Although you could feel ashamed. It feels to me like an investment and an investment gone wrong. But don't forget, if you, the channel said somewhere early on, I'm going to be disappointed if this is an investment thing gone wrong. I think that's completely the wrong way to do it. We've seen lots of cases where it could be an investment thing that's gone wrong, but that could just be the window into the bigger case of the investment. Like maybe we're going to solve what Peter Harrington is in a bad mood about in the next letter. Maybe in the next letter it's going to come out, yes, Peter Harrington invested, and yes, that's lost money, and that's why he's upset. Now we're supposed to go investigate the criminal enterprise of the investment. We don't know where this is going to take us. All right, a real pleasure to share this time with you and get a chance for all of us to engage in this very new, very interesting experiment live. hopefully I'll see you next week for the next episode. If you're subscribed to the channel and you click the notification bell, you will get notified about new videos on the channel, so you'll know not to miss it. I'll see you next time.